Bienvenidos a Conversaciones, soy Inés Capdevila. Hoy estamos con Timothy Garton Ash, que tiene varios roles. Timothy es historiador, periodista también y sobre todo conoce muy bien Europa y el resto del mundo. Fue invitado a Argentina por el programa Argentina 2030, organizado por Iván Petrella de la Jefatura de Ministros de la Nación. Timothy, thank you very much for being here with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
There's a surge of populism around the world. Philippines, India, Egypt, Europe. Can we speak about populism in North America and the US?
Absolutely. And I think that what's so amazing is that different as all these phenomena are, Turkey, Hungary, Brexit, Britain, Trump's America, they have some things in common. And I think some of them are also true of Argentinian populism too. A leader who claims the authority to come directly from the people. That authority trumps all other institutions, courts and other independent institutions. It's like the Rousseau's general will. It turns out the people are only part of the people because there are always the others who don't belong to the people. This tremendous emotional nationalist narrative, you know, not all nationalists are populists, but all populists are nationalists. So I think there are a lot of common features as well as the differences.
Well, there's a common root. You were speaking about some of them, but is there there seems to be, like if you go to the US or Poland or Hungary or even Turkey, some sort of cultural thing going on. Especially like if you look at the voters of Trump, there's a bit of resentment. Is it economic resentment? Is it cultural resentment? What is there that lies underneath populism in the world?
So that's a really important question because Bill Clinton famously said, it's the economy is stupid. Right. And actually, in this case, it's the culture stupid. That's to say, in some cases like the US or Britain, there is an economic element. There was real hardship and real inequality. But if you go to Germany, there's not an economic issue.
Absolutely.
Even the voters of the populist parties are well off economically. It's the culture. And I like to say that there are two kinds of inequalities. There's the inequality of income and wealth, but there's also what I call the inequality of respect. And a lot of this is about half our societies feeling that they're ignored, not taken seriously by metropolitan, cosmopolitan, liberal elites, by mainstream media, let alone respected by those elites. And the Trumps and the Brexiters, the populists, speak to those feelings of the other half of our society.
Is it respect or is it power?
Well, I think it starts with simply being noticed and taken seriously. And I think there's a genuine problem there. Because it's true that, I mean, I was passionately in favor of Britain staying in the European Union. But the way in which some of my fellow Remainers, as we call ourselves, spoke about the Brexit voters was like 18th century aristocrats in France talking about the peasants. Who are these backward reactionary idiots who can't see the point? And I think you find that in many, many places. So I think there was a genuine grievance, a real grievance there. And one of the things we have to do in response is to find a way of reconnecting with the other half of our own societies.
And do you think these strong men you were talking about in the beginning, do they answer to the needs of the people, these people? Because what you can tell is if you look at Trump, at Orban, at Salvini, they are speaking to them, but they are also lying. There's a lot of lying in their messages.
Well, absolutely, but they speak to them, first of all. They express some of their grievances, notably about immigration. Immigration is the hot-button issue in most of these new populisms, which, by the way, is an interesting difference from Argentina, where it's not about immigration. And yes, they're lying, that's true, but they're rather magnificent lies. That's to say, it's a very heartening, emotionally appealing nationalist narrative. If only we can get rid of these other people, these foreigners, draw up the drawbridge, we'll be a great nation again. We'll make Italy great again.
Right.
We'll make Spain, we'll make wherever great again. So one of the things we, broadly speaking, liberal, international, evidence-based people have missed is this emotional component,
right.
this attractive narrative.
So these promises the strong men make to people, are they also the seed of their eventual fall? Because what we see here in Latin America is like strong men or strong women that come to power with a lot of promises and messages of bigger countries, of nationalism, of patriotism. They usually start fading when the people realize their promises are never going to become true.
Right.
So in these promises Trump has made, Orbán has made, Erdogan has made, Duterte in Philippines has made, that eventually they won't be able to be up to the promises.
So I think that's absolutely right. And what's fascinating about being here in Argentina is it's a kind of laboratory of post-populism.
Absolutely.
And since we're in just going into populism, and of course, often populists deliver handouts
Right.
from the state budget. I mean, that's a classic thing. So we're going to lower the pension age again. In Poland, they promised a benefit for every second and third child. This, if you combine great story, nationalist story, with handouts, that's a very powerful formula. I think you're right, it'll be unaffordable in the long term, also because they're economic nationalists, and therefore we now have a trade war between the US and China.
Yeah.
And we know from history what the results of protectionism and trade wars are. So you're right, but I have to say, I don't want us to go through 12 years. I don't want us to go through the 1930s before we get out of it.
Absolutely.
So I think we have to try and, as it were, learn from your experience to short-circuit the process and come up with some more convincing answers.
You've spoken about post-populism and Argentina as a laboratory. You've been here a few days. What have you seen that could become a lesson to Europe or to the US eventually?
Well, I mean, I think you've mentioned one element of it, but also how populism, broadly speaking, in Argentina did connect with a large part of the society for quite a long time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, that's indisputable. So that if we who want to defend liberal democracy and pluralism and international cooperation, we've got to kind of learn a lesson from that. And how do we... So, for example, a lot of my friends are so cosmopolitan that they don't even like the idea of patriotism. They think talking about the nation is suspect. That's no good at all.
Right.
We cannot leave the nation to the populists or to the right wing.
Right.
So we have to find a liberal patriotism, which is civic and inclusive. And I'll tell you, the person who's doing this is Emmanuel Macron.
Oh.
I mean, if you ask who has begun to got the parts of the answer, Macron. He's internationalist, but he has a strong liberal, patriotic, Republican story. He's for the free market economy, for economic reform, but also for social justice and l'Europe qui protège, the Europe that protects. That's the kind of mixture we need.
But Macron is the president of a country that's very much for the EU, the European Union. Can the European Union as a whole speak to the people's need? Because it seems that they have identified this problem for a long time now. But they have never been able to come to terms or to solve it, to speak straight into people's need, into their eyes. And that seems to be like kind of getting nasty, like in the UK, in Italy.
Absolutely. Let me be absolutely clear. the European Union is the most advanced model we have
Yeah.
of liberal international order,
Absolutely.
bar none. So if anyone cares about international order, they should care about the EU. At the moment, it is in a process of disintegration.
Yeah.
There's no question about it, partly because of external forces and populism and so on, but also because of its own construction mistakes. It has this crazy common currency without a common treasury.
Right.
Extending to such diverse economies as Germany and Greece. I mean, think about it. The economists told us in advance, and we haven't solved that problem. And a lot of the difficulties in Italy, you mentioned Italy, founding member state of the European Union, now being run by the populists. Why? The Eurozone, immigration. And then we have this idea that we've got European democracy because we have a directly elected European Parliament. That is true objectively, but not subjectively.
Right.
People don't feel themselves to be represented.
Absolutely.
And it's back to the nation. So we have to make the case for Europe in our own countries, in our own national politics, in our own languages.
Yeah.
And not believe it can all be done by just giving more powers to Spitzenkandidaten.
Well, you mentioned Macron, but Merkel has been doing that, exactly that, for a long while. But now she's like always on the verge of getting out of government, and especially there's this surge of the extreme right in
So what's
Germany.
happening in Germany is really alarming, because Germany is, make no mistake, the central power of Europe.
Right.
And it was also the political center that was holding.
Yeah.
And because of the problems of the Eurozone, which Germans see as coming at their expense,
Yeah.
the truth is that Germany is the greatest beneficiary from the Eurozone, but that's not the narrative. Again, narrative that has become established in German public opinion, plus the refugee crisis, which has had this huge impact. We now have a right-wing nationalist populist party in Germany, which in the latest opinion poll scored higher than the SPD, the oldest social democratic party in the world. Less than a right-wing nationalist populist party in Germany, of all places.
Absolutely.
It's extremely worrying.
So Germany is endangered in a way. France is kind of not very firm because Macron has this very strong message, but to the inside of France, his government is also shaky.
Right.
Who is going to take the lead in the EU?
Good question. And you didn't mention Brexit, but the other big country leaving, Italy gone to the populists. Spain actually is not doing too badly in this context.
But Pedro Sánchez is also a bit shaky.
Sure, exactly. But I mean, relatively speaking, in these times. But the answer is we don't have that, because it would have been Macron and Merkel plus what I would call a coalition of the willing, right? Supportive states. That's what you need in Europe, is 4 or 5 other countries on a particular issue. And at the moment, we don't have that at all. So I just don't see it. So analytically, I can only see the European crisis becoming deeper before maybe we find the way out of it, right? And when might that happen? At the moment, young Europeans still take it all for granted.
Right.
They take it for granted that most of Europe is liberal democracies. I can wake up on Friday morning, buy a ticket for 80 euros, fly from one end of Europe to the other, have a nice weekend, meet a girl or a boy, settle down there. I mean, we've never had a Europe like that, and they take that for granted. When people begin to feel that is really threatened, and that hasn't yet happened, I hope they will start standing up to defend it.
So you're hopeful Europe is going to find a way out of this
So
moment.
maybe the crisis is our opportunity. Yes. I am, but I mean, as I say, I think it's going to take some time, and I think we have more populism to come.
Okay. Going back to populism and Trump, how hurtful is he going to be for America if he still maintains this path of populism?
So I distinguish a few things. In Poland and Hungary, populists are destroying the institutions of liberal democracy, which are young and fragile. I don't believe that's happening in the United States.
Well,
I believe, no, I think actually
No, I agree
the
with you.
constitutions
Yeah.
and the institutions of government, the one that is failing is Congress.
Yeah.
Congress is the one that's not
Absolutely.
doing its
Right
job.
now it's
but the courts
quite
and the press and actually the executive, you know, people in government, we know
Yeah,
that
the inner
famous
forces,
op-ed
yeah,
in the
the
New
op-ed.
York Times. I mean, there's resistance inside the executive, the Mueller investigation. So liberal democracy is holding. So in that sense, that's the good news. Second thing, public discourse, the quality of public debate, disastrous. Hyperpolarization, two tribes, can't talk to each other anymore. So that's very damaging. Third thing, the United States is a power in the world. Very badly damaged. So we had that at the time of Vietnam and Watergate, and then the US came back completely. Just completely. Came absolutely roaring back. Question, can it come roaring back after 8 years of Trump? In this very,
you said 8.
Yeah, because at the moment I say
You
8,
think it's-
because you have to, at the moment I do not see the Democrat candidate to beat him so long as the economy, I mean, you've got to give it to him.
Yeah,
Napoleon's question about a general, is he lucky? Well, Trump is lucky because he's got this amazing economy behind him. So we have to reckon with 8 years, I think.
Good. One last question. One of your last book was about free speech.
Yeah.
Do you think fake news and free speech are inextricably linked?
No, I think the business model of Facebook and Google and fake news are very closely linked. So remember, the internet has given us, I mean, we're going to be visible on the internet to
Absolutely.
people around the world, anyone, anywhere who speaks Spanish or English. So that's an amazing, so it's given us amazing opportunities. But what's happened is that the algorithms of Facebook and Google, which are designed to maximize engagement, they want people to stay online as long as possible and share as much as possible so as to get as much advertising revenue as possible. And fake news is sexy.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton was a Russian agent is more interesting than Hillary Clinton has complicated proposal for pension reform.
Absolutely.
So people share it, and then the algorithm promotes it and promotes it and promotes it. So one of the things I'm actually working on out of my work on free speech now is I'm working with people at Facebook to try to persuade them to change the algorithms and shift the priorities so they become a more responsible kind of media platform.
I see. You spoke about Facebook and Google. This is technological change that has disrupted and
Right.
given another form to the world. This is going to grow. Are these cultural and identity problems also going to grow because of the technological disruption?
So technology is, of course, a double-edged sword, always. It has positive and negative potential. We know that. So the question is, how do we shape that technology? And we had a period in the 1990s where the internet was going to set us free, and it was the greatest thing since Gutenberg, and it was all wonderful. Now we have a period of cyber pessimism and cyber cynicism, and it's all terrible. I think the truth is, as so often, somewhere in between, but I think a great deal will depend what decisions the big platforms make in the next few years and how we treat them. Because one thing about them is that they're monopolies, and the monopolies have never been good for free speech.
This is a populist question. Do you think these platforms, Google, Facebook, they rule the world much more than presidents do now?
I think rumors of the death of the state have been much exaggerated. And I still think the President of the United States is the most powerful man in the world, and President Xi Jinping is the second most powerful man in the world. But we've never seen anything like them. I call them private superpowers. If Facebook were a country, it'd be the largest country on earth.
Yeah.
So they are a new kind of player in global politics, and we have to kind of wake up to that.
Yeah, we haven't, or have we?
I think we're just waking up to it now, yes.
Thank you, sir. It
Real
was
pleasure.
wonderful to have you here. Fue Timothy Garton en Conversaciones. Acá soy Inés Capdevila. Muchísimas gracias por habernos acompañado.